So there are sort of two major parts of the policy I'm announcing today. The first part applies to all disengaged 16 or 17-year-olds, whether or not they are receiving a benefit. We want to see these young people back in some form of education or training so that they are better placed to move into the workforce and not onto a benefit. The government already funds a number of organisations which advise young people on training options as part of the transition services. That's been a good start, but we're going to make significant changes to that. The first change is to find out who all of these young people are, because the current information we have is very poor. At the moment, we simply don't know because we lose track of them as soon as they leave the school system, and that has got to change. So the government is going to amend the Privacy Act and the Education Act to allow two things to happen. Firstly, schools will be required to tell us when 16 and 17-year-olds leave during the year. And information on these young people will be shared between the Ministries of Education and Social Development. For the first time, we will be able to find out who all these disengaged 16 and 17-year-olds are. We'll be able to find out what circumstances they are in, what problems they had, if any, at school, and what their risk of long-term welfare dependency is. We're then going to fund community and other organisations to provide transition services, similar in some ways to the current service, but one which is much more closely targets the young person, those that are at risk of long-term welfare dependency. But most importantly, it's going to have a range of tools, such as being able to arrange access to social services like drug or alcohol counselling. And there's going to be a significant change for these services. Most importantly, and it's a very important change, their payments will be focused on results. For the first time, a considerable part of the government's funding of transition services will depend on something actually changing. Now, there's a number of ways that could be measured, including goals like the young person successfully completing a training program or not being on a benefit when they turn the age of 18. Put simply, we are going to make it worth someone's while to get these young people back on track. At the same time, the government's going to provide a lot more training places. Next year, there will be 7,500 places available under the government's Youth Guarantee policy, which provides free study towards school-level qualifications in places like Polytechs and Wananga. And in 2 years' time, we will have built up the number of trade academies so that 4,500 places are available in free, work-focused trade and technology training, and they are on offer for these young people. So the important point is that there will be options available. Now, in the end, of course, it will be up to the kids themselves. But no one at the end of this process will be able to claim that they weren't offered every opportunity to get their lives back on track. So that's the sort of first major part of the new approach, which is very heavily focused on those 16 and 17-year-olds that are disengaged from school, not in work, not in training, and yet we don't have good information about them. There will be that wraparound service, and they will have every opportunity to get back into work or get into training of some sort. The second part, though, concerns those young people who are receiving benefits in their own right. I need to make it clear that today's announcements will not affect the invalid's benefit, which actually can be received by people as young as 16. But there will be changes for young people who receive other sorts of benefits. At the moment, these young people are largely left to their own devices. Well, I believe that this hands-off approach has failed this group of young people. We can and we must do a lot better by them. So the policy on benefits for young people is going to change. These changes will apply to all young people who get the special 16 and 17-year-olds benefit and it will also apply to 18-year-old teen parents. It has three elements. The first is that we're going to fund community and other organisations to provide comprehensive and concentrated support to these teen beneficiaries. So let's take a step back for a moment and think about these young people and who they are. They're very vulnerable. Many of them actually have a child under their control. They typically come from disadvantaged backgrounds, and many have complex and indeed multiple problems. While some of them have supportive parents or other good role models in their lives, many have grown up with little access to positive adult guidance. They're in need. They need a competent adult to walk alongside them, support them and help them access the educational and social services they so desperately require. They need a competent adult to help them manage their money. They need a competent adult to help them meet the obligations and responsibilities that come with receiving financial assistance from the state. And they need a competent adult to help raise their aspirations above the here and now. That is why we are going to fund these support providers to be the competent adults in these young people's lives, to provide intensive case management and mentoring services. Second, we are not simply going to hand over benefit money every fortnight. Instead, we're going to have a much more managed system of payments, with the young person's support provider, or MSD in some cases, paying bills on their behalf and helping them manage within their budgets. So while there's a lot of detail for officials and ministers to work through, we envisage a few things. Some essential costs like rent and power will be paid directly on the young person's behalf. Money for basic living costs like food and groceries will be loaded onto a payment card that can be used only to buy certain items of goods, and cannot and will not be used to buy things like alcohol or cigarettes. There will be a certain limited amount of money for the young person to spend at their discretion, but it will not be like today. It will not be the entire benefit. That money will be paid for rent and for food and for looking after the young person in their care as the state intended it to be. And the support provider will be active. For each young person, they'll be active in helping them with budgeting and teaching them how to manage money. And third, there's a deal involved here. Young people who are receiving these payments will have clear obligations, for example, to attend budgeting or parenting programs. Most importantly, each of these young people will have to be in education, training or work-based learning. When I say everyone, I mean everybody. That includes teen parents.